Hello and welcome to episode 200 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Dougherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Dougherty. To celebrate this huge milestone, I wanted to make sure to bring on my two regular co-hosts, Sarah Says and Maz. This episode is also going live on Thanksgiving Day. So the three of us are going to talk about traveling experiences for which we are thankful. I'm so grateful for all of you who helped us make it this far. We've been doing this show for almost 4 years. It would not have been possible without the positive response. Before we get started, comment on this episode of the podcast on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Dougherty YouTube channel. If everyone could just take 30 seconds to comment congratulations or give us a favorite memory from the podcast, it would really help us. Also, if you aren't subscribed, you have to rectify that. We have busted our backsides for almost half a decade, and all we ask is that you comment and give us that subscription. In addition to Sarah Says and Maz, I have to thank a few more people. My wife Courtney has not only been on the show a number of times, including our second most listened to episode up to this point, but she also has helped behind the scenes in a number of ways. My mother actually did a bunch of research that helped us gain a bunch of listeners in the middle of 2022, and we've kept most of them on a regular basis. Jillian, Kiki, and Steven from A Life in the Parks have all been fairly regular guests on the show. I've talked to Danielle, Jay, Scott, Justin, Alicia, Stella, Jeff, Spirit Day, Sarah, Melinda, Christina, and many, many others. I also need to thank friends like Ken, Matt, Stacy, Greg, and Ty, who have helped me to promote this thing. Because of this show, I've had people recognize me in the theme parks, which I absolutely love, and you can always feel free to say hi if you see me. I was given media credentials for Tampa Bay Comic-Con this year and got to see Jodie Benson, the voice of Ariel, in Disney's 1989 animated classic, The Little Mermaid, sing Part of Your World in a small conference room at that event. I developed some amazing friendships. We raised money for CASA of Pinellas County in the fight against domestic violence. We helped raise money for LGBTQ+ organizations. We collected something like 160 basketballs, soccer balls, volleyballs, and more to donate to the Boys and Girls Club of America. We shed a light on disabilities and chronic illness. We did all of that while having a blast talking about theme parks. So right now, it's time to welcome two of my absolute favorite people. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And not only do we have Sarah Says, but we also have Maz back on the show. We have both of my co-hosts on to celebrate this 200th episode. Maz, thanks for being here as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we decided that since we are celebrating our 200th episode as a podcast, that we would do something a little special. And since the day just happens to coincide with Thanksgiving, we thought we would look back on some things we are thankful that we have gotten to experience. We're going to talk about the theme parks, but we're also going to talk about other traveling experiences because it's a much bigger topic than we make it sometimes when we just focus on the theme parks. And I thought this would be a good topic for today. There's one thing that I wanted to say before we get started. I've said it a couple times before. 90% of podcasts give up after 3 episodes. Of the 200,000 podcasts that make it past 3 episodes, 90% of those fail before reaching 20 episodes. So, ladies, I would like to thank you for all of the hard work that we have all put into this, that we are definitely in the 99%. Maybe not income-wise, but we are in the 99% of success rate when it comes to podcasts. So, we are talking about traveling experiences for which we are thankful. So, Do you have one? You want to start off here, Sarah?
Yeah, I would say my senior trip that my parents sent me on to Europe. At the time, my best friend, her mom is from England, and they were already going on vacation there the summer after I graduated. And they invited me to come with them to visit their family in London and in York. And also, her aunt and uncle there have a house in France. So we got to travel through London, we got to travel through York. We were there for a while. And then we also got to spend some time on the coast of France as well. I spent a couple weeks there, and I'm definitely very thankful for that trip.
So I want to ask something as somebody who definitely has France on the bucket list for a vacation at some point. They say that if you learn a little French, the French people really respect that and they will treat you better. Did you have to sit down and learn some French when you were going on that trip, or did you just rely on your generally bubbly personality to get people to like you?
So I had taken French in high school, so I had a pretty base knowledge of like conversational French, not great. And I did kind of refresh a little bit before we went, but I was also not in any big metro areas. We were in these little tiny towns where not many people spoke English. So they definitely did, like, when you first walked in, they're like, oh, Americans. But if you like would greet them in French and try, then they definitely, those who spoke English would speak back to you in English. But if you tried, they definitely were a lot more welcoming. Like I said, I can't speak to Paris or like any of the metro areas, but definitely try. And the nice part too was her aunt and uncle too, I believe, were both fluent in French. So we'd try and then they would take over.
Well, that certainly always helps. All right, Maz, do you have a travel experience for which you're thankful?
Yeah, similarly in the sense of like other people kind of allowed this to happen. But when I was younger, when I was a child, my family got the opportunity through like a friend of the family. They had a place, and we were able to go stay at their place in Vero Beach over the summer once. And it was one of those times where like my whole family needed a vacation. Like we needed to get away from like craziness that was happening in life. And so like being there, there was a private beach. It was a super nice place. So there were days when we had the beach entirely to ourselves. And it just stands out in my mind as this like golden long weekend where we all got to be together and hang out and kind of take a break from things and enjoy the water. And oh my gosh, the seafood was delicious because it was all like, we caught this at 3 p.m. Would you like it for dinner? And it was just such a great time.
That's such a great story because I think a lot of times, especially the three of us, right? Like we're used to talking about theme park vacations. So a lot of those vacations are go, go, go. And we're trying to fit as much stuff in as humanly possible. And every once in a while to have a vacation that is a little bit of a kickback like that and to get the chance to relax and actually do the point of a vacation is nice, and to have it be a memory that's so clear for you and so important for you when you didn't do a ton is a good reminder that it's not always about how much you can fit in and how much you can put on your Instagram stories. It's sometimes about like recharging and just making the most of your time.
Definitely. And being able to spend time with the people you're there with. I think a lot of times lives are so busy that we don't really get to spend as much meaningful time with the people who mean a lot to us in our lives. So being able to take a vacation, any kind of vacation where you can spend time with the people you care about is, the best.
Oh, absolutely.
Amen to that. That's going to lead into my first one actually pretty well because back in 2014, my best man at my wedding, Matt, and I just decided on a whim that we were going to do a cross-country road trip. So we hopped into his truck, which is a dumb idea when one of you owns a Prius and you're doing a cross-country road trip. Maybe we should have crammed into the Prius. But anyway, We did a cross-country road trip. We drove from Lancaster, Pennsylvania down to New Orleans, Louisiana. We went through Texas, into New Mexico, into Arizona. We turned around at the Salton Sea in California and headed back to Arizona, where I took a plane back because I had to get back to work. And then he actually drove the rest of the way back. And we had some just amazing experiences. Because I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, we actually found that they were playing the Austin City Limits Festival in Austin, Texas. So we woke up in Kenner, Louisiana in our hotel room, drove to Austin to see Pearl Jam, and then immediately got back in the truck and drove to Santa Fe, New Mexico without sleeping. So it was nuts. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this up as well was because at the festival right before Pearl Jam, they were on the main stage and there was a second stage, but there was a place where you could stand and see both. And I had a friend who said, hey, I know your musical taste and there's this new artist that you might really like. And she just so happened to be going on right before Pearl Jam on the second stage. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll get to check her out. And the most amazing show. I did not know one song because I had not heard of her before. The most amazing show I ever saw, and that artist was Lorde, and now she is in my Mount Rushmore of favorite artists. And I've traveled a number of times to see her play, and it was just a really great experience. And then, of course, like you said, Maz, like hanging out, just somebody that I hang out with a lot, but when you're just sitting there on the highway and you've got hours, like you get into deeper conversations, you touch on things that maybe you wouldn't talk about if it was just in the day-to-day aspects of life. So now that he lives in a completely different part of the country, I'm glad I have those experiences to look back on and remember. And I think that was a great example that you use, Maz, because sometimes we do have to get away just to spend time with the people in our lives. So I want to change directions now and go a little bit to the theme parks. And are there some things in the theme parks that you're thankful that you got to experience now that they don't exist, or now that things have changed a little bit and the procedures are different maybe? So I'm going to start with Sarah.
Well, if we're talking about things that don't exist anymore, I miss the original Fast Pass. Like, I'm not going to lie. I miss it so much. And like, yes, I know it was stressful to like, have to get to the kiosk to like go get a Fast Pass, but the entertainment factor of trying to get all your family's tickets and have one person just like book it over to wherever you want it to go and just sit there and be like, shink, shink, shink. It was an experience as well as you got your Fast Pass. And yeah, I miss the old Fast Pass. I was very thankful for that.
You felt like you earned it, right? So
right? You worked hard for it. You didn't have to rely on internet to get your Fast Pass. Same with like how I remember I was so like, just like, oh my gosh, when we went to Disney World and Disneyland, it's one, you go one kiosk, but then in Disney World, you could walk up to a kiosk and you could make 3 of them. That was like, oh my gosh. You didn't have to run to the ride to get one. You could set it up where it was like, oh sweet, we'll just get our 3 right now. And we didn't have to worry about using our phones. We didn't have to, it was so much more convenient.
And it didn't cost $400 a day.
Right.
All right, Maz, how about you? Do you have anything from the theme parks that you're thankful you got to experience?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Castle Dreamlights. I loved being able to see all those lights on the castle, and I have such a distinct memory of going as a child and then even, as an adult years later And seeing them turn on those lights and seeing the castle light up and looking like it was just covered in icicles or stars. And it was just so beautiful. And I understand, they've changed it to the projections now for so many reasons. And the projections look cool, but like they don't have that same wonder factor where you look at it and you're just like, wow, this is incredible. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, cool. I see that every night when they do the fireworks show or whatever. It's just a different version of it. Yeah, I loved those lights.
Awesome. I am going to throw the weirdest curveball in here. And I am going to say something that at first is going to sound ridiculous. But if you hear me out, you'll understand. And that is COVID and the first weeks after the parks reopened after the pandemic, because it was Sarah's laughing. So I am not thankful for COVID. Let me just say that. I'm thankful that I have not, knock on wood, had it yet. But when those parks shut down, and when you think about when the parks shut down, they shut down if there's going to be a major hurricane, and sometimes not even then. And there was 9/11. So when the parks announced that they were shutting down, that was one of the ways that you knew this was a serious thing and this was going to be bad, and a lot of bad things were going to happen. And when the parks reopened, that felt like a return to a sense of normalcy, but also there were still rules and precautions that were put into place. So we weren't acting like nothing. I mean, most of us weren't acting like nothing was wrong, but it was the first thing that I noticed where people were saying, we're going to find a way to navigate this. And yes, our lives are going to change for a little bit, but we're going to do things a little differently. But if we do, we can still open Universal and we can still open Walt Disney World. Universal put out a great deal for annual passes to try to get people to become Universal APs. So I got my first Universal annual pass because of that deal. So there were so many things that happened, and I saw, like, you listeners didn't get to see them laughing at me when I said this, but I hope that I have explained myself in a way that has justified what I was saying, because I know that when I walked into Magic Kingdom that first day, I let out a huge exhale because it felt like finally something, after all of these months, something feels normal. Now, I'm also a big stickler for the rules, as the two of you know. I know that there are some people who aren't, so that's a little different situation, and I'm not even saying that they opened at the right time or anything like that. If you're a cast member and you felt they opened too early, that's a perfectly valid, thought process. That's all I'm saying. Please tell me I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy.
I kind of thought you were at first, but then like you said, I just had to wait till the end.
Yeah, you explained yourself. It all makes sense.
Everybody deals with those kind of times differently. Like, that was such a stressful time for me. I'm not the type of person who likes to be locked up in the house. Like, I'm a go, go, go kind of person, and everything just stopped. And I needed something. It didn't have to be the theme parks, but it ended up being the theme parks. So, Sarah, are there any other things that you miss from when you were going as a kid? You're thankful that you got to do them before they disappeared.
Let me think about that. Because it would definitely, if I was a kid, it would definitely be Disneyland. I miss the People Mover at Disneyland. I miss that.
Oh, that's a great one, actually. So
that was so good. I love that I grew up on the West Coast, so I got to experience like Disneyland throughout all the different stages. I love DCA, but I do miss the parking lot across from the entry gate of Disneyland. that's something I was thankful for as a child. But now, I mean, it's nice because you don't have to take a bus like you do in Walt Disney World to get to each park. You can walk just across the Esplanade, which is really nice. Yeah, definitely the people mover. I'm just trying to think of what else they had that I missed. That I think the top of my list would be people mover.
Well, Walt Disney World changes a lot more than Disneyland, and
True.
Disneyland has done a good job, at least to this point, of adding and not subtracting to add. So you don't lose as many things on the West Coast as we have lost on the East Coast. Maz, do you have any other things that you're thankful you got to experience before they disappeared?
Yeah, I'll go over to the East Coast and I will say the Great Movie Ride. I loved the Great Movie Ride. And that's not to say I don't love Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway because I do. I think that is an awesome ride and it's like a must do for me now every trip. It's the best. But I just wish there was some way where we didn't have to choose and we could have kept them both because the Great Movie Ride was so cool and I was always such like a behind the scenes movie nerd as a kid that being able to kind of be transported into that was very cool for me. And also, it had Mary Poppins. And now there are no rides with Mary Poppins. So that's sad for me to lose.
But somewhere on Walt Disney World property or the Walt Disney Company's property, we assume they still have the Bert and Mary animatronics. They have to be there, right? Come on.
Yes. And I am going to find them. No, I will not break any
Don't
laws.
make a whole other buzzy out of this. Like,
Yeah.
they just disappear one day.
And you're like, where'd they go? And meanwhile, they're like in my Zoom background.
Like, who are those people behind you?
Yeah. Don't question it. Don't look too close.
So that's a good one. I do like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and I understand why they made the change because the Great Movie Ride did not have long waits. However, when we kind of look back and think of the problems at Disney's Hollywood Studios, one of the reasons is all of the rides have super long waits now. That's one of the problems with that park. So I would say, it could be argued that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway brought a ride that was too in demand to a park that needed things that aren't in demand. And to get to Sarah's point about how Disneyland doesn't get rid of things as much as Walt Disney World, they added on with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway instead of taking away something. So that is a really good answer, Maz. I have to go with, I know he's still alive over in Disneyland, but J. Thaddeus Toad. I just wish we still, and this is another, like Maz said, like the Winnie the Pooh ride is great. I'm glad it exists. I know that kids love it. I even love Winnie the Pooh. Who doesn't? Everybody loves Winnie the Pooh. However, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was so amazing. And at Walt Disney World, we had 2 tracks. So it was a different ride depending on which side you got. And that's always cool. Like, we kind of had the better version of Mr. Toad. Now, we didn't have Toad Hall like they have over at Disneyland, but it was almost a better version because we had the 2 different tracks. And Walt Disney World barely ever gets the better version of anything. Come on.
It's true.
So, Sarah, let's leave the theme parks again and see if you have anything else that you want to add to this one.
I've been thinking about it, and there's quite a few trips that and travel that I've definitely been really thankful for. My parents sacrificed a lot of their own travel. I mean, they traveled a lot, but to send me and my sister places. I think I'm going to go with really recent on this one. And I'm really thankful for my parents taking my son and I on this ginormous road trip through the Midwest, to Yellowstone, to Devil's Tower, to Deadwood, to Mount Rushmore, like basically in the spring, this last spring. taking us on this RV trip with them that they do pretty much every year. And it was almost a month, and we drove through all of that. And I'm really thankful for that, because even though I didn't do well at Yellowstone because of the elevation, my son just had a fantastic time. And of course, he's really close with his grandparents. So getting to experience things that I never really thought I'd ever get to experience, because who flies to Yellowstone? Like, I mean, yes, there are people, but it is so expensive. Like, who does that? And so getting to experience all of those things has been fantastic, and getting to spend that time with my parents. And yeah, I'm definitely very thankful for that trip.
I was just excited to see you tell somebody from Chicago that Yellowstone was in the Midwest.
Wait, did you not know?
I would say that's the West, not the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, they called themselves the Midwest because compared to where we are, it depends on where in Yellowstone you are, because it covers 3 states. So we just keep getting closer to Mass. So you're in the real Midwest. We were in the kind of Midwest.
I'll let you have it.
Yeah. But if I'm on the other side, let's say, okay, if I'm on the east side, I'll say I'm in the Midwest. If I was on the west side, then we were in the West.
There you go.
All right, Maz, do you have any other experiences?
Yeah, I funnily enough have a road trip memory as well. But it's from when I was a kid. My family did a road trip to Mount Rushmore. And as we were driving through, all the different states, we ended up in South Dakota on this road in the middle of nowhere at night. And it was super late at night. And we stopped because my parents looked outside and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to, wake the kids up, because we were asleep at that point. And they brought us outside, and the stars were like nothing I have ever seen. It was the most beautiful thing. And it is just entrenched in my memory as this incredible thing, looking up and just, we're from the Midwest, the Chicago area. So there's a lot of light pollution where I live. And I have always loved the stars, and being able to see them truly with zero light pollution was just this jaw dropping. I could have probably stayed there the whole trip and been happy kind of memory.
Yeah, that's amazing. When I think of road trips, one of my favorite things is when it's the middle of the night and you pull into a gas station and you're just thinking about how it's this weird sense of freedom. When you're a kid and you're not allowed to go out at 2:00 in the morning, but here you are, and this, like you said, the stars are out there, and you're just there are no rules. I could just get in this car and go anywhere, and it is such a sense of freedom that it's really hard to explain. I think the last one that I'm going to use, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but there was this time I went to Ireland. I don't talk about it very often.
What?
But I did have to mention that before we ended this episode, because the podcast actually played a huge part in that. We were able to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. But when I think about going on that trip, and, when Maz said, going on a trip with people who are in your life and, sort of slowing down, I think one of the things that I realized when I was by myself and at some points, on a trail, with no cell phone or any access, was you kind of realize the things in your day-to-day life that you miss. As much as you're having this great experience and you'll remember it forever, you're also kind of oh, I want to tell so-and-so about this thing. And it really does not only give you new experiences, but I think when you travel the right way and you have the right experiences, it gives you an appreciation for your everyday life as well. It lets you know, okay, these are the things that really are important to me, because they're the things that you think of, the people you think of when you're experiencing these things. So This was so fun. I had such a great time talking about travel experiences with Sarah and Maz. And thank you so much for all of the hard work that the two of you have put in so that we could actually get to this point. I really, really appreciate it.
This podcast is all you. You are the one putting in all the effort, all the hard work. So thank you to you. This is all possible because of your work.
Yes, thank you, Rick. You put in all the hard work. We just come hang out and talk. And
yeah, we get to just have fun.
Yeah.
This has been episode 200 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Dougherty. If you love hearing all three of us on the same episode, you just have to wait 2 weeks. Sarah says Maz and I will be talking about Jonathan Groff, who is the voice of Kristoff in the Frozen movies and played the king in the Disney Plus version of Hamilton. That episode will air on December 12th. Sunday will mark the start of December, which is also known as Vlogmas. Last year, I took on the Vlogmas Challenge and released a video, vlog, or podcast every day in December. Because of that, we actually had a huge jump in viewers, listeners, and subscribers. In fact, since then, even though we have gained a lot of listeners, our subscriber growth has slowed down significantly. Do me a favor and take the 30 seconds to subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Dougherty YouTube channel. And if you could comment on this episode with a congratulations for hitting 200 episodes, that would also be great. With the holiday shopping season kicking off tomorrow, next week we will do something a little different. This past year, I have interviewed the authors of 3 different books. In episode 201, I'll have portions of all 3 of those conversations. Phil Gramlich put together a collection of stories for Walt and His Park, the stories you probably never heard. Ethan Galogly used his time hiking the John Muir Trail as inspiration for his book, The Trail, a Novel. And the husband and wife team of Greg Glasgow and Catherine Mayer wrote Disneyland on the Mountain, Walt, the Environmentalist, and the Ski Resort That Never Was. That will be next Thursday on the show. Until then, have a great week.